I'm Rodolfo, 34, standing on the dock of my grandfather's lake house that should still be mine. The cedar beams and stone foundations hold more memories than my own mind. When Mom declared, "This is theirs now, you're not allowed to come," giving my sanctuary to my sister, something in the old walls seemed to shudder in protest. What she never understood was that this house chooses its owner, not the other way around, and it had chosen me long ago. Before I tell you how the house itself fought back, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Hit that like button if you've ever felt something was rightfully yours, and subscribe to hear more stories of family betrayal and unexpected justice. The first time I visited Lake Everwood, I was 7 years old. Grandfather Maxwell picked me up in his weathered blue pickup truck, the radio playing Johnny Cash as we wound through miles of pine-lined roads. "This place is special, Rodolfo," he told me, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Been in our family 3 generations. One day, it'll be yours to care for." That first weekend remains etched in my memory, learning to bait a hook at dawn, the mist rising off the water like ghost stories coming to life. My tiny hands struggled with the fishing line while grandfather patiently guided me. "No rush, son. The lake teaches patience better than any man could." Those weekends became our tradition. While my mother Beatrice remained in the city with my sister Melissa, I'd escape to the lake house monthly. Grandfather taught me carpentry in his workshop behind the house, how to feel the grain of wood, how to respect the natural curves and knots rather than force them into submission. "A good craftsman listens to the materials," he'd say, guiding my hands along a piece of oak. "Same with this house. It speaks, if you know how to listen." I thought he was being poetic until I began noticing things. The way certain doors would stick for everyone except grandfather. How the stone fireplace would roar to life with minimal kindling when he built a fire, but require significant effort from visitors. The house seemed to respond to him, to recognize his touch and voice. The contrast between my lake weekends and home life was stark. Beatrice consistently favored Melissa, the ballet recitals that required new, expensive outfits, the private tutoring when her grades slipped, the lavish birthday parties. Meanwhile, my academic achievements earned brief acknowledgments, my hobbies deemed impractical wastes of time. "Your sister needs more support," Mom would say when I questioned the disparity. "She's more sensitive than you." The subtext was clear. I was expected to fend for myself while Melissa remained perpetually fragile. Grandfather became my refuge, not just from favoritism, but from the emptiness of not belonging. During my teenage years, while friends pursued parties and relationships, I gravitated toward the lake house and its quiet acceptance. Under grandfather's guidance, I helped replace rotting deck boards, rewire outdated electrical systems, and restore century-old windows. Every nail hammered, every joint sanded connected me deeper to the structure. When I turned 22 and graduated with my architecture degree, grandfather pulled me aside during the small celebration we held at the lake house. "You understand buildings better than most," he said, pressing something into my palm, an unusual iron key with intricate engravings. "This opens the hidden cabinet in the library wall. Don't go looking until after I'm gone. But remember, this house knows who truly belongs here." I laughed it off as one of his eccentric sayings, tucking the key away. 4 years later, when pneumonia took him at 87, those words resurfaced. The funeral was small. Grandfather had outlived most friends, and our family had never been large. Beatrice arranged a brief, practical service, while Melissa complained about the drive to the cemetery. The reading of the will brought the first major confrontation. Grandfather left his modest savings split equally between Melissa and me, but the lake house went solely to me, with a curious addendum. "To Rodolfo, who listens to the house and hears its needs." "That's not fair," Melissa immediately protested, though she'd visited the lake house perhaps 5 times in 15 years. "Why does he get the valuable property?" "Maxwell had his reasons," the attorney said firmly. "The deed transfers directly to Rodolfo." Beatrice's lips thinned to a disapproving line. "Your grandfather played favorites, just like your father did before he left." The familiar accusation hung in the air, that somehow my bonds with the men in the family had driven them away from her. The next 5 years, I poured myself into honoring grandfather's legacy. Every other weekend, I'd drive the 3 hours from my city apartment to the lake house. My architecture firm allowed flexible remote work, so I often stayed 4-day weekends, cataloging needed repairs and methodically addressing them. The property taxes and maintenance consumed nearly a third of my income, but I never considered selling. The house became more than property. It was my connection to grandfather, to authenticity, to peace. Neighbors around the lake nodded in approval, seeing the improvements, occasionally stopping to share stories about old Maxwell and express gratitude that the house remained in the family. During those years of restoration, I began experiencing what grandfather had tried to explain. Tools would appear precisely when needed, sometimes in places I'd already checked. Lights would brighten when I entered certain rooms after exhausting workdays. The persistent leak in the kitchen mysteriously resolved after I spent a weekend repairing the boathouse grandfather had loved. "You're anthropomorphizing a building." My girlfriend Jennifer laughed when I mentioned these occurrences. Houses don't have feelings. But sometimes, in the quietest moments before dawn, sitting on the dock with coffee warming my hands, I could swear the house was breathing with me, settling its foundations in time with my own rhythms. I couldn't explain the connection without sounding crazy, so I simply continued the restorations, trusting that what grandfather had tried to tell me would eventually make sense. What I never anticipated was that my own family would force that understanding through betrayal. The trouble began subtly, like most family conflicts do. 3 years after grandfather's death, Melissa started calling more frequently. Her interest in my life suddenly awakened. Each conversation inevitably turned to the lake house. "The kids would love to spend a weekend at the lake," she'd say. "Alex is really into fishing now." I welcomed the chance to connect with my niece and nephews. Alex was 12, Sophie 9, and Taylor just 6. Good ages to begin appreciating nature. Their first visit went surprisingly well. The children explored the property with genuine enthusiasm, especially Alex, who took to the lake with a natural affinity that reminded me of myself at his age. What struck me as odd was Melissa's behavior. While the children played outside, she wandered through the house-opening cabinets, examining fixtures, and asking pointed questions about the property value. "The realtor in town mentioned lakefront properties are selling for a fortune now," she commented, running her hand along the kitchen counter. "You could make quite a profit if you sold." "I'm not interested in selling," I replied, noticing how the old copper kettle on the stove suddenly toppled over, though no one was near it. Melissa jumped at the noise. "This place is falling apart, Rodolfo. You can't possibly keep up with the maintenance on your salary." Her husband Frank seemed embarrassed by her transparency. Later, as we fished off the dock while Melissa napped, he apologized. "Things have been tight since she decided to quit her job. 3 kids in private school, the new SUV payment. You know how it is." I didn't know, actually. My modest lifestyle and careful budgeting had always kept me financially stable, if not wealthy. 2 weeks after their visit, Beatrice called. "I think you should consider letting Melissa use the lake house during the summers," she began without preamble. "Her therapist says the children need more outdoor activities." "They're welcome to visit," I offered. "No, Rodolfo. I mean, let them have exclusive use from June through August. You can use it the rest of the year." The request stunned me. "Mom, I've put thousands of dollars and countless hours into restoring grandfather's house. I work remotely from there most weekends." "Family means sharing," she replied with the righteousness that had always shielded her favoritism. "Your sister has 3 children to consider." 3 children she chose to have, I said, immediately regretting my sharpness. Beatrice sighed dramatically. "You've always been selfish. Just like your father." The comparison to my father, who'd abandoned us when I was 10, stung as intended. After hanging up, I paced the apartment, anxiety building until I decided to drive to the lake house midweek, needing its calming presence. That night, Jennifer joined me, bringing dinner and a sympathetic ear. As I recounted the conversation with my mother, strange things began happening around us. The dining room lights flickered rhythmically, almost like Morse code. The temperature dropped noticeably despite the summer evening. "Is the furnace acting up again?" Jennifer asked, rubbing her arms. I checked the thermostat, finding it had been turned down to 55 degrees, though neither of us had touched it. When we tried to adjust it, the dial physically resisted turning for several seconds before suddenly giving way. Later, as Jennifer tried to open the guest bedroom door, the knob turned, but the door remained firmly shut, as if something held it from inside. When I tried, it opened easily. "This place gives me the creeps sometimes," she admitted, kissing me goodnight before retreating to the guest room that had finally allowed her entry. I lay awake in my grandfather's old bedroom, listening to the house settling around me. The usual creaks and groans seemed different, more purposeful, almost communicative. "What are you trying to tell me?" I whispered into the darkness. In response, the wind chimes on the porch began tinkling, though the windows were closed and no draft existed. The next morning, Jennifer reported strange dreams about being watched by the house itself. There was no malice, she explained over coffee. More like evaluation. As if the house was deciding whether to trust me. I thought about grandfather's warning that the house chose its owner, not the other way around. For the first time, I wondered if he'd meant it literally. My concerns multiplied 2 weeks later during a family dinner at Beatrice's house. Melissa dominated the conversation with complaints about her cramped suburban apartment. "The kids share bedrooms. Do you know how unhealthy that is for their development?" she lamented, serving herself a third glass of wine. "And the neighborhood has gone downhill. Someone's car was broken into last month." Beatrice nodded sympathetically before turning piercing eyes toward me. "Your sister needs more space, Rodolfo. That house sits empty most of the week while you live in your apartment." "It's not empty," I corrected. "It's being maintained. And I'm there every weekend." "Playing house," Melissa scoffed. "Meanwhile, my children lack basic space for healthy development." "Perhaps," Beatrice said slowly, "it's time to consider what Maxwell would truly want. Family supporting family was always his priority." An uncomfortable silence fell as I processed her revision of grandfather's character. He had indeed valued family, but he'd also valued responsibility, earning your way, and respecting boundaries. All principles Melissa had consistently ignored. "Grandfather left me the house for a reason," I finally said, "and I intend to honor his wishes." The conversation shifted after that, but the tension lingered. As I helped clean up, I noticed Beatrice and Melissa whispering in the hallway, falling silent when I approached. Driving home, an inexplicable sense of foreboding settled over me. Something was brewing, and instinctively, I knew it involved my sanctuary. That weekend, I found myself speaking aloud to the empty rooms of the lake house, seeking comfort from its solid presence. "They won't take you from me," I promised, feeling only slightly foolish talking to a building. As if in response, the stubborn lock on the boathouse door, that had plagued me for months, suddenly turned smoothly under my hand. The betrayal, when it came, was both sudden and calculated. 6 months after the uncomfortable family dinner, I received a certified letter from an unfamiliar law firm. Scanning the legal jargon, certain phrases leaped out: contested inheritance, family property rights, and reassessment of testamentary intent. I immediately called my own attorney, forwarding the documents. Her assessment was blunt. "Someone's trying to challenge your grandfather's will. After all this time, it's unusual, but not impossible." "Who would?" I began. Before the obvious answer settled like a stone: my mother and sister. "The petition is filed under Beatrice Scott's name." "Yes." Disbelief and anger warred within me as I drove to confront my mother directly. Finding both her and Melissa at the house confirmed my suspicions of their coordination. "How could you do this?" I demanded, slapping the legal papers onto the kitchen counter. Beatrice remained maddeningly calm. "We're simply correcting an oversight in your grandfather's estate planning." "Oversight?" He deliberately left me the lake house. There was no oversight. Melissa stepped forward. "Dad left everything to you, too, before he disappeared. Our family has a history of men making impulsive decisions that hurt the women left behind." The comparison was so absurd I almost laughed. Grandfather's carefully considered will that he reviewed with his attorney multiple times is nothing like Dad abandoning us. "The point," Beatrice interjected, "is that family assets should benefit those most in need. You're a single man with a good career. Melissa has 3 children and financial challenges." "Challenges," she created. "And since when is being single a disqualification for property ownership?" Beatrice's expression hardened. "We've discovered a clause in your grandfather's original purchase agreement that specified the property should remain available to all family descendants. Our attorney believes this creates grounds for shared property ownership." The calculated nature of their attack stunned me. They'd been researching, planning this ambush, while maintaining the pretense of normal family relations. Worse, they deliberately sought a legal loophole to undermine grandfather's explicit wishes. "This is about money," I said flatly. "You want to force me to sell so Melissa gets half." "Actually," Melissa smiled thinly, "we're not asking for a sale. We're requesting full transfer of ownership to me, with financial compensation to you at 20% of market value. That's insane. The house is worth at least $600,000, and we're offering you $120,000. Quite generous considering the circumstances. My head spun at the audacity. What circumstances? Beatrice's voice turned gentle, which always signaled her most manipulative moments. Rodolfo, we know about the alterations you've made without permits. The boathouse conversion, the electrical work. One call to the county inspector would result in significant fines. The threat hung in the air between us. They'd been gathering ammunition, looking for leverage. Work I'd done carefully and correctly, but yes, without navigating the county's Byzantine permitting process for historical properties. You're blackmailing me over grandfather's house? My voice sounded distant, even to my own ears. We're offering a solution that helps everyone, Beatrice countered. You get a substantial sum without the burden of maintaining an aging property. Melissa's family gets the space they desperately need. And if I refuse? Melissa's expression hardened. Then things get ugly. Legal battles, inspectors, tax audits. Do you really want that? You've never even cared about the lake house, I said, looking between them. Either of you. You complained about visiting when grandfather was alive. Now suddenly it's essential to your happiness? Plans change. Needs evolve. Beatrice stood, signaling the conversation was ending. Our attorney has prepared the transfer documents. You have 1 week to sign voluntarily before we proceed with alternative measures. As they ushered me toward the door, Beatrice delivered the final blow. This is theirs now. You're not allowed to come, she said, nodding toward Melissa. The sooner you accept that, the easier this transition will be for everyone. I drove to the lake house in a fog of disbelief and betrayal, the 3-hour journey passing in what felt like minutes. The familiar gravel driveway crunched under my tires, the sound usually comforting now seeming to underscore my potentially final arrival. The house stood silhouetted against the dusky sky, windows reflecting the last orange streaks of sunset. Had it always looked so vulnerable, so temporary in my life? Inside, I moved through rooms shaped by 5 generations of my family, touching doorframes smoothed by countless hands, floorboards that had absorbed decades of footsteps. In grandfather's study, I collapsed into his leather chair, finally allowing the emotions to surface. They're taking you, I whispered to the empty room, and I don't know how to stop them. The house responded in its way. The temperature dropped suddenly, the familiar settling sounds intensifying to definite creaks and groans. The desk lamp flickered 3 times before stabilizing at a brightness beyond its usual capacity. For the first time, I didn't dismiss these occurrences as coincidence or imagination. Instead, I thought of grandfather's words, "The house knows who belongs here," and the mysterious key he'd given me years ago, directing me to the hidden cabinet in the library wall. I'd never looked for it, respecting his instruction to wait until after he was gone, then simply forgetting in the grief and responsibilities that followed. But now, feeling my connection to this place threatened, I retrieved the iron key from my wallet where it had remained since his funeral. The library walls appeared solid, lined with bookshelves containing everything from classic literature to practical manuals on plumbing and electrical work. Running my fingers along the edges of each shelf unit, I searched for anything resembling a keyhole or hidden panel. On the 3rd bookcase, behind a row of leather-bound classics, my fingers detected a slight temperature difference in the wood. Pressing firmly, I felt a small section give way, revealing an aged brass keyhole. The iron key slid in perfectly, turning with a series of clicks that suggested multiple tumblers engaging. A 2-foot square panel swung outward, exposing a small compartment containing a leather-bound journal and a manila envelope yellowed with age. With trembling hands, I carried both to grandfather's desk. The journal contained detailed accounts of the house's history, beginning with its construction in 1894. More surprising were grandfather's personal entries describing experiences eerily similar to mine. Tools appearing when needed, temperature changes reflecting his moods, doors opening or remaining stubbornly shut depending on who attempted passage. The Wilkinson place isn't just a house he'd written in 1978. It holds something of each person who has loved and tended it, not ghosts, nothing so dramatic, more like memories absorbed into the very structure, creating a consciousness of sorts. Later entries detailed his conviction that the house itself had opinions about who should inherit it. Tested my theory today. A 1999 entry read, "Brought Harold's boy Thomas to visit, thinking perhaps the next generation should have a chance. House nearly took his finger off when the workshop door slammed unexpectedly. Next weekend, Rodolfo comes. We'll see how the old place responds to him." I remembered that weekend, my first time using grandfather's tools independently, building a simple birdhouse while he supervised. Everything had gone suspiciously well, tools balanced perfectly in my small hands, wood splitting cleanly along grain lines. The manila envelope contained legal documents, the original deed, property surveys, and a handwritten note addressed to me. Dated just weeks before his death, grandfather's shaky handwriting conveyed his final thoughts. "Rodolfo, if you're reading this, you've found trouble or I'm gone. Likely both. The house has chosen you, as I suspected it would. There have been rumors about this property since before my time, and ever, that it absorbs the intentions of those who care for it, that it protects its chosen caretaker. I can't explain the how, but I've experienced the what often enough to believe. Family may contest my decision. The deed has a clause about family descendants that could be misinterpreted. Know this was intentional misdirection. Legal advice from the 1930s suggested such language to prevent government seizure during Depression-era property confiscations. If challenges come, let the house help. It has ways. Trust what happens, even when it seems impossible. Some will call it coincidence or accuse you of trickery. Let them. The truth requires no defense. Care for this place as it will care for you, grandson." Maxwell. I read the letter 3 times, emotions cycling between grief, confusion, and, strangely, hope. Outside, rain began falling, droplets striking the windows in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. The house creaked and settled around me, but not with its usual randomness. The sounds moved systematically, from the attic down to the foundation, as if the structure was taking inventory of itself. For the first time since receiving the legal threat, I smiled. They have no idea what they're dealing with, do they? I asked the empty room. The rain intensified in what felt remarkably like agreement. The next 3 days passed in a blur of angry phone calls with my attorney, tearful conversations with Jennifer, and methodical packing of my personal belongings. The legal outlook appeared grim. While my attorney believed we could eventually prevail in court, the process would be lengthy and expensive. The clause about family descendants created just enough ambiguity to permit a challenge. "They're using intimidation tactics," my attorney explained. "The permit violations threat is concerning, though. Fighting that would mean additional legal complications." I wandered the house with increasing melancholy, touching familiar surfaces, apologizing aloud to the walls. I tried. I told the empty rooms. I don't know what else to do. The house's responses grew more pronounced with each passing hour. Lights flickered in distinct patterns when I entered rooms. The temperature fluctuated dramatically despite the thermostat settings. Most notably, certain doors began refusing to close properly, as if the house rejected the idea of being sealed up and abandoned. On the 4th night, unable to sleep, I descended to the basement with a flashlight. Unlike the rest of the meticulously maintained house, this space had always resisted my renovation attempts. Tools would disappear, light bulbs would burn out prematurely, and an inexplicable dampness would emerge whenever I began work, only to vanish when I gave up. "What are you hiding?" I asked the darkness, running my hands along the fieldstone foundation. My flashlight beam caught something unusual, a slight discoloration in the mortar between stones. Pressing experimentally, I felt the section give way slightly. Using a nearby garden trowel, I carefully removed the crumbling mortar to reveal a small cavity containing a water-damaged notebook. Back upstairs, I carefully separated the fragile pages, revealing sketches and notes dating to 1894, the original construction plans for the house, created by my great-great-grandfather Elias Scott. What made them extraordinary were the annotations describing unconventional building practices. Incorporated timber from the lightning-struck oak as specified by Abenaki foreman, one note read. Placed river stones from sacred site at each cornerstone. Followed traditional blessing ritual before setting foundation. Further pages detailed unusual construction techniques, specific wood joinery methods, the positioning of windows to align with solstice sunrises, strategic use of metals in unexpected locations throughout the structure. Most intriguing were references to the indigenous knowledge incorporated into the design. Joseph insists the house must be built to choose its inhabitants. His people believe dwellings have spirits that must be respected. Incorporating the methods he suggests to honor this belief costs little and respects his wisdom. I recalled fragments of family lore about our ancestor employing indigenous craftsmen when other builders refused to work with them. What I dismissed as simply progressive thinking for the time apparently extended to incorporating their spiritual practices into the house's very construction. The final pages contained the most explicit confirmation of what I'd begun to suspect. House completed according to all specifications, traditional and unconventional. Joseph conducted final blessing, stating the dwelling will now recognize its true family across generations. When I asked for clarification, he explained that buildings absorb the energy of those who inhabit them, becoming almost living entities over time. This house, built with intention and specific materials, would develop this sensitivity more rapidly and purposefully. It will know who truly belongs here, he told me, and it will reject those who seek to possess without respect. I remain skeptical but must acknowledge unusual occurrences already, tools remaining precisely where I need them, though I know I placed them. Elsewhere, rooms warming without fire on particularly cold mornings. Perhaps the old ways contain wisdom our modern sensibilities too readily dismiss. I closed the fragile notebook, mind racing with implications. The house wasn't merely old and full of quirks. It had been deliberately constructed to develop a form of consciousness, to recognize its rightful inhabitants. What I'd experienced wasn't imagination or coincidence, but the fulfillment of its intended purpose. For the first time since receiving the legal threat, I felt something beyond despair, a quiet certainty that events would unfold as they should. I didn't need to fight the legal battle alone. The house itself was my ally, possibly my strongest one. What should I do? I asked aloud, feeling only slightly foolish. The house's response came in an unexpected form. The electricity suddenly failed throughout the building, plunging me into darkness. Before I could locate my flashlight, a single lamp illuminated in the hallway, then another in the living room, creating a path toward the front door. Following the trail of light, I found myself standing before the entrance, the deadbolt unlatching itself with an audible click. Outside, the moon illuminated my truck in the driveway. Keys visibly placed in the ignition, though I distinctly remembered leaving them on the kitchen counter. The message seemed clear. Leave, but not permanently. Let events unfold without interference. You want me to go? I clarified, feeling a distinct temperature drop around me. Let them try to move in? The front door swung open gently, the porch light flickering twice. Simultaneously, my phone chimed with a text message from Melissa. We're arriving Saturday morning to assess what updates the house needs. Don't be there. I smiled into the darkness. I understand now. Packing an overnight bag, I took one last look around the main floor. I trust you, I told the house. Do what you need to do. As I pulled away down the driveway, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Every light in the house had come on simultaneously, blazing through the windows like a declaration of intent. Then, systematically, each extinguished until the structure stood dark and seemingly dormant against the night sky. But I knew better now. The house wasn't sleeping. It was waiting. I checked into the Lakeside Motel, a modest establishment 5 miles from the house. Close enough to monitor the situation, far enough to avoid direct confrontation. The elderly owner, Harold Williamson, recognized me immediately. "Trouble at the old place, Rodolfo?" he asked, handing me the room key. "Saw your sister and some fancy designer measuring the exterior yesterday." "You could say that," I admitted. "Family disagreement about ownership." Harold snorted. "Your grandfather would have some choice words about that. Never knew a man more certain about who should inherit his property." For 2 days, I maintained a careful distance, observing periodic visits from contractors and decorators. Melissa's SUV appeared regularly, sometimes accompanied by Beatrice's sedan. Moving boxes accumulated on the porch, furniture deliveries were scheduled, and a landscaping company arrived to assess the grounds. Saturday morning marked the official move-in date. From the window of the Lakeside Cafe, coffee growing cold before me, I watched 3 moving trucks lumber down the narrow road toward the house, followed by Melissa's vehicle packed with her husband and children. What happened next unfolded like a strange dream, visible in fragments from my distant vantage point, supplemented later by the panicked phone calls I received. The first sign came when the movers couldn't get their keys to work in any door. After 30 minutes of frustration, Frank apparently broke a window to gain entry, only to discover all interior doors similarly resistant. When they finally managed to force the front entrance, the real difficulties began. "Is this your idea of a sick joke?" Melissa demanded when she called 2 hours later. "What did you do to the electrical system?" "I haven't touched anything," I answered truthfully. "What's happening?" "Everything electronic malfunctions the moment Frank touches it. Lights go out, the refrigerator stops, even our phones die. It's some kind of targeted power surge, and don't pretend you don't know about it." I suppressed a smile. "Old houses have quirky wiring. Grandfather always said the electrical system had a mind of its own." Her frustration was audible. "Fix it, Rodolfo. Whatever childish prank you've set up, disable it now." The next call came from Frank himself, his typically confident voice uncharacteristically shaken. "Listen, man, I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but this isn't funny anymore. The kids are scared." "What's going on?" I asked, genuinely curious about the house's specific tactics. "The plumbing's gone haywire. Taps turn on by themselves, but only when Melissa enters a room. The water's ice cold, even from the hot tap. And there's this, I don't know, knocking in the walls whenever we try to unpack, like something's telling us to stop." I thought of Grandfather's letter. "Let the house help. It has ways." "Maybe the house doesn't want new owners," I suggested. Frank's laugh was nervous. "Melissa would say, 'You're being ridiculous,' but," he lowered his voice, "the kids say they can feel someone watching them." Alex swears his name was whispered while he was alone in the upstairs bedroom. "Your grandfather's old room." Grandfather's room, where I'd spent countless nights listening to his stories, where I'd slept peacefully even during the worst thunderstorms. The room that always felt warmest in winter, coolest in summer, regardless of the actual temperature. "Alex has good instincts," I said simply. "Maybe listen to him." 3 hours later, Beatrice arrived to help manage the increasingly chaotic situation. Her practical nature and dismissal of superstitious nonsense made her initial confidence predictable. That confidence lasted approximately 45 minutes, according to the frantic voicemail she left while I was swimming in the motel pool. "The staircase it's moving, Rodolfo. I know how that sounds, but the steps seem to shift under our feet. Taylor nearly fell from halfway up. And the mirrors. When I look in them, I don't see myself clearly. The reflection is wrong somehow, older or younger or, I don't know." "What did you do to this place?" I returned to the cafe for dinner, watching the house from afar as darkness fell. Even from this distance, the strange behavior was visible. Lights flickering in patterns, windows that appeared to frost over despite the mild spring temperature, the chimney producing smoke, though I knew the fireplace couldn't have been lit. Around 8:30, a particularly telling event occurred. As I observed through binoculars, Melissa attempted to hang a large artwork on the living room wall, visible through the picture window. 3 times she positioned and hung it. 3 times it immediately crashed to the floor, the final fall resulting in broken glass that scattered unnaturally far across the room, forcing everyone to retreat. Later examination would reveal that every nail, hook, and screw they attempted to drive into the walls either bent inexplicably or worked loose within minutes, regardless of technique or tools used. By nightfall, the family had retreated to the first floor, abandoning attempts to use the bedrooms after Taylor reported seeing Grandpa Maxwell sitting on the bed, shaking his head no. They made makeshift sleeping arrangements in the living room, where the fireplace stubbornly refused to light despite Frank's best efforts. The temperature inside plummeted to uncomfortable levels. Every blanket they unpacked developed mysterious damp patches within minutes. Electronic devices, from phones to the children's tablets, lost power despite being fully charged. The electric heaters they'd brought as backup simply wouldn't function. Near midnight, I received a text from Alex, who'd apparently borrowed a neighbor's phone. "The house doesn't like them, but it showed me your fishing spot. Why does it talk to me but not Mom?" I smiled, recalling how the boy had demonstrated genuine appreciation for the property during their previous visit, asking thoughtful questions about its history, treating the space with respect rather than entitlement. The house was discerning in its opposition, terrorizing Melissa and Beatrice while merely unsettling Frank and communicating gently with Alex, who approached the property with the right spirit. Sophie and Taylor seemed to receive intermediate treatment, experiencing neither the worst phenomena nor the benign communication, Alex reported. By morning, Frank was loading essential belongings back into their SUV, while Melissa argued vehemently with the moving truck drivers who refused to remain on the property after experiencing their own set of inexplicable events. Tools disappearing, truck engines stalling, personal items relocated when unwatched. "This place is haunted," one driver declared, audible even from my distant observation point. "You couldn't pay me enough to move stuff in here." Melissa's fury was visible in her wild gesticulation, her face flushed even from a distance. Beatrice attempted to intervene, her usually commanding presence diminished somehow, shoulders hunched as she kept glancing back at the house. What finally broke their resolve came shortly after noon. As the family gathered on the porch for an impromptu strategy discussion, every door and window in the house suddenly slammed open simultaneously, followed by a rushing sound described later as like a giant inhale. Then, with equal suddenness, everything slammed shut with such force that decorative glass panes shattered and door hinges bent. In the silence that followed, a single message appeared, frost forming the words on the inside of the living room picture window, visible to everyone assembled outside. Rodolfo's. The phone call from Melissa came 30 minutes later as I sat calmly finishing lunch at the cafe, still observing the distant commotion. "Whatever you're doing, stop it right now," she demanded, voice trembling between fury and fear. "This sick game has gone far enough." "I'm not doing anything, Melissa. I'm 5 miles away eating a sandwich. Wireless technology, remote devices, hidden speakers. I don't know how you're pulling this off, but it ends now. Mom is having a panic attack because of your childish stunts." I sighed. "Have you considered the possibility that the house simply doesn't want you there?" "Houses don't want things," she shrieked, drawing attention from nearby diners. "They're buildings, not people." Grandfather always said this one was special, that it chooses its owner, not the other way around. More of his superstitious nonsense. "You've obviously rigged the place with tricks to scare us away." I remained calm. "Is that what you think is happening? That I've somehow controlled the temperature, electrical system, plumbing, and structural integrity remotely? That I made frost form words on windows? Ask yourself what's more likely, elaborate technological sabotage by an architect with moderate technical skills, or something genuinely unusual about a house that's been in our family for generations." Her breathing was audible through the phone. "I'm calling the police to report your harassment." "Go ahead. I'll show them my motel receipt proving I've been here since Thursday. Then I'll share Grandfather's journal detailing similar phenomena dating back decades." "How do you think that report will read?" The silence stretched between us until she spoke again, voice smaller now. "The children are terrified, Rodolfo. Whatever's happening, please make it stop." For the first time, genuine concern for my niece and nephews pierced my satisfaction. "Are they hurt?" "No, just scared. Taylor won't stop crying. Sophie keeps asking why the house is angry. Alex keeps saying it's not meant for us, that it belongs to you." "He's right," I said gently. "Bring them to the Bayside Cafe. I'm here now. We can talk about what happens next." 40 minutes later, their vehicles pulled into the cafe parking lot. The children emerged first, scanning the patio until they spotted me. Taylor broke away from Frank's hand, running to wrap his arms around my waist. "Uncle Rodolfo, the house is alive," he exclaimed, eyes wide with equal parts fear and excitement. "Not exactly alive," I corrected gently, "but definitely aware in its way." Sophie approached more cautiously. It made Mom's coffee turn into mud. Real mud, with worms. Alex hung back, studying me thoughtfully before speaking. "It showed me things. In the walls, old photos of you and great-grandfather, and it whispered that it's been waiting for you to understand." Melissa and Beatrice approached lastly, both looking haggard and defeated. Frank followed, carrying a sleeping bag under one arm, his expression suspended between embarrassment and relief. "You win," Melissa said flatly, dropping into a chair opposite me. "Whatever tricks you've played, whatever technology you've used, it worked. We're leaving." "I haven't done anything," I repeated. "The house is protecting itself." Beatrice scoffed, though the sound lacked her usual conviction. "Ridiculous superstition." "Is it?" I countered. "You both felt it. So did the children. So did the movers. So have countless visitors over decades. Grandfather documented it all. I placed the journal and basement notebook on the table. The house was built with intention, incorporating indigenous knowledge about structures developing consciousness over time. Great-great-grandfather Elias collaborated with an Abenaki foreman who incorporated specific materials and techniques to create a dwelling that would, eventually, recognize its rightful inhabitants. "That's impossible," Beatrice insisted, though she eyed the ancient notebook with uncertainty. "Is it more impossible than what you've experienced over the past 24 hours?" I asked. "The selective phenomena that affected you and Melissa severely, while merely unsettling Frank and communicating gently with Alex." Frank nodded reluctantly. "It's true. When I was alone, things were just off, uncomfortable. But when Melissa entered a room, all hell broke loose. Because she approached with entitlement rather than respect," I explained. "The house responds to intention." Alex had been flipping through Grandfather's journal, stopping at certain passages. Great-grandpa wrote that it protected him during a break-in, made the floor creak to wake him up, then caused the intruder to feel so cold and disoriented he fled. "That's right," I confirmed. "It protects those it recognizes as family. Not by blood alone, but by connection and care." Melissa's expression fluctuated between disbelief and disturbing comprehension. "You really believe this?" "I know it," I corrected. "And now, so do you." Beatrice had been uncharacteristically quiet, staring into her untouched coffee. Finally she looked up, eyes brimming with unexpected tears. "Your grandfather tried to tell me once about the house being special. I dismissed him as fanciful, impractical. Just as I often dismissed you." The admission stunned me into silence. "The legal maneuvers were my idea," she continued. "Finding that clause about family descendants, threatening you with permit violations. I convinced myself it was about fairness, about Melissa's needs." She paused, shoulders slumping. "But it was really about control, about not accepting that Maxwell chose you over us for reasons I refused to understand." The honesty was so unprecedented, I momentarily questioned if I was actually hearing it. In 34 years, I'd never witnessed my mother acknowledge a mistake, much less the deeper motivations behind her actions. "The house," she continued hesitantly. "When I tried to enter your grandfather's study, I felt judged and found wanting. For the first time, I understood how you must have felt all those years when I favored your sister." Melissa stared at our mother in shock. "Mom, what are you saying?" "That we were wrong," Beatrice said firmly. "The house belongs to Rodolfo, not because of legal documents or inheritance, but because it has chosen him, as Maxwell chose him. And we need to respect that." The tension that had built over months of conflict began dissolving, replaced by something fragile but genuine, the first threads of honest communication. "What now?" Frank asked practically. "Now," I said, "we drive back to the house together. I'll enter first, signaling your peaceful intentions. If you approach with respect, rather than entitlement, the phenomena should subside. And then?" Melissa pressed. "And then we talk about appropriate boundaries. The house is my home, but that doesn't mean your children can't visit their uncle, can't learn to fish on the dock or explore the woods as I did. It means approaching with respect, not ownership." The drive back to the lake house formed a strange procession, my truck leading, followed by Melissa's SUV and Beatrice's sedan. As we pulled into the driveway, I noted subtle changes in the property's appearance. The aggressive aspect had softened. No frost on windows, no smoke from the chimney, no flickering lights. The house waited, watchful but no longer actively hostile. Standing before the front door, I placed my palm flat against the wood. "They understand now," I said quietly. "No more frightening the children. They're family too, even if this isn't their home." The door swung open gently, warm air spilling onto the porch, a clear invitation. I entered first, feeling the house settle comfortably around me, creaking in familiar welcome. The others followed cautiously, Beatrice and Melissa hesitating at the threshold before stepping carefully inside. The transformation was immediate and obvious. The oppressive cold vanished, replaced by comfortable warmth. Lights functioned normally, the persistent knocking in the walls ceased, and the water ran clear from every tap. "It feels different," Sophie whispered, clutching Frank's hand. "Because it knows you're visitors now, not invaders," I explained. "There's a difference between being welcomed into a home and trying to claim it as your own." We gathered in the living room, the sunlight streaming through windows that hours earlier had radiated hostile frost. The children gradually relaxed, exploring corners with curious respect rather than entitled possession. "I owe you an apology," Melissa said finally, voice low to avoid the children overhearing. "I never appreciated what this place meant to you. Never understood why grandfather left it specifically to you." "You never asked," I pointed out. "You just assumed you deserved it more." She nodded, accepting the criticism. "The way I've always done." Beatrice joined us, her usual commanding presence diminished by recent events. "The legal proceedings will be dropped," she stated. "I've already texted our attorney to withdraw all claims." "Thank you," I acknowledged, "both for that and for recognizing what's been happening." "I still don't understand it," Beatrice admitted. "But I can't deny what we experienced. And I can't deny that Maxwell knew something I refused to believe." As afternoon melted into evening, an unexpected peace settled over the gathering. The children discovered board games in the hall closet, games that had stubbornly hidden from Melissa during the previous day's searching. Frank inspected the foundation with professional admiration, asking thoughtful questions about the construction techniques. Most surprisingly, Beatrice sat quietly on the porch swing, watching the sunset over the lake. When I joined her, she spoke without turning. "He loved you differently than he loved us. I resented that for years without understanding why." "He loved me differently because I loved this place differently," I suggested. "Not more or less, just differently." She nodded slowly. "The house knows. Somehow, impossibly, it knows." As darkness fell, Melissa approached with a practical question. "Should we finish unloading their things? The moving trucks left, but we still have essentials in the cars." "That depends," I answered carefully. "Are you planning to stay?" Her expression shifted through several emotions before settling on resignation. "Not permanently. Not anymore. But maybe the kids could visit sometimes? They love it here, especially Alex." "They're always welcome," I assured her. "As visitors, not owners." The resolution wasn't what anyone had expected when the day began, but it felt right. A recognition of truths too long ignored, boundaries too long violated, and connections too long undervalued. As the others prepared to depart for hotel rooms in town, Alex lingered, running his hand along the banister of the main staircase. "It talks to me too," he confided. "Not with words exactly, but with feelings. Is that weird?" I smiled, recognizing in my nephew the same sensitivity I'd developed at his age. "Not weird at all, just means you're listening properly. Maybe you could come fishing with me tomorrow morning? The lake is beautiful at dawn." His face brightened. "I'd like that." As the vehicles pulled away, temporary peace established but permanent understandings altered, I stood alone on the porch. The house settled around me, the familiar creaks and sighs now clearly communicative rather than random. "Thank you," I told the empty air, feeling slightly less foolish than I once might have, "for choosing me, for protecting yourself." The porch light flickered twice in acknowledgement, and somewhere inside, a door opened welcomingly toward my future. Spring melted into summer, bringing significant changes to my relationship with the lake house and my family. The legal threats permanently withdrawn, I finally felt secure enough to commit fully to the property, listing my city apartment and making the lake house my permanent residence. My architecture firm approved remote work arrangements with occasional office visits, allowing me to live where I truly belonged. Jennifer, initially skeptical of my sentient house explanations, became a believer after experiencing the property's selective welcome firsthand. "It's warmer when I'm with you," she observed during her first visit after the confrontation, "and things just work better, like it's making an effort to accept me because I matter to you." The relationship between the house and my family evolved in unexpected ways. Alex visited most weekends, developing the same deep connection to the property that had defined my childhood. Under my guidance, he learned to fish from the dock, to identify bird calls echoing across the water, and to handle tools in grandfather's workshop. Most importantly, he absorbed the fundamental lesson of respect for the natural world, for the craftsmanship of previous generations, and for spaces that hold meaning beyond monetary value. Melissa's transformation proved most surprising. The entitlement that had driven her claim on the property gradually dissolved, replaced by genuine interest in family history. During carefully negotiated visits, she explored grandfather's journals, asking thoughtful questions about our ancestors and their connection to the land. "I never knew great-great-grandfather worked with indigenous builders," she commented one afternoon, sitting on the dock while her children swam. "That wasn't in any of the family stories Mom told." Beatrice preferred practical narratives, I explained. Grandfather's stories about the house's special nature didn't fit her worldview. Melissa nodded thoughtfully. "I'm starting to understand I inherited more than her blonde hair, her dismissiveness, her entitlement. I've modeled those behaviors without questioning them." Such self-awareness would have seemed impossible months earlier. The house had catalyzed not just a resolution to our property dispute, but a deeper reckoning with family patterns long accepted as immutable. Beatrice remained the most resistant to change, maintaining polite but distant relations. Her worldview had been too thoroughly shaken to permit comfortable interaction with the property that had so dramatically rejected her authority. She visited rarely, and never alone, carefully deferring to house etiquette I established. Simple rules like asking permission before entering certain rooms, not attempting to rearrange objects, and speaking respectfully about the property's history. The house responded accordingly, neither welcoming nor hostile, maintaining neutral phenomena during her visits. Lights functioned normally, plumbing remained reliable, but the warmth and subtle assistance I experienced never extended to her. The relationship remained one of mutual tolerance rather than acceptance. 6 months after the confrontation, Jennifer and I became engaged, planning a small ceremony on the property. The house's approval manifested in subtle but unmistakable ways: flowers blooming out of season along the garden path, the persistent draft in the master bedroom finally resolving, the dock-weathered boards suddenly appearing freshly restored, though neither of us had worked on them. "It's giving us a wedding present." Jennifer laughed when we discovered the workshop reorganized overnight, tools arranged in perfect efficiency for upcoming projects. The children adapted with the resilience unique to young minds. Taylor, initially frightened by the house's defensive phenomena, now delighted in its occasional playfulness, lights that brightened when he entered with a cheerful greeting, his favorite breakfast cereal somehow never running out during weekend visits. Sophie developed a habit of thanking the house whenever she departed, a courtesy that often resulted in lost items mysteriously appearing by the front door. Frank, practical and initially skeptical, eventually acknowledged the property's unusual nature after experiencing too many coincidences to dismiss. "I'm an accountant," he told me during a fishing expedition. "I believe in patterns and evidence, and the pattern here is undeniable." Most significant was the shift in family dynamics beyond property considerations. The confrontation had exposed long-established patterns of favoritism and entitlement, creating opportunity for honest conversations previously avoided. During one such discussion, Beatrice finally acknowledged the roots of her behavior. "After your father left, I channeled all my insecurity into protecting Melissa. She reminded me of myself, socially conscious, emotionally expressive. You were so much like Maxwell, so self-sufficient. I told myself you didn't need the same attention. That self-sufficiency was survival," I pointed out, "not a sign I needed less support." She nodded, eyes downcast. "I know that now. Too late to change the past, but not too late to recognize it honestly." Such conversations, painful but necessary, gradually rebuilt connections I'd assumed permanently damaged. Not perfect reconciliation, but genuine progress toward healthier relationships. The house itself seemed to thrive under consistent care and appreciation. The persistent structural issues that had plagued certain areas resolved spontaneously. The garden produced abundantly with minimal intervention. Even the weather seemed charmed, violent storms somehow skirting the property while delivering needed rain. One evening, sitting on the dock with Alex after a successful fishing expedition, he asked the question I'd been expecting: "Will the house choose me someday? When you're old like great-grandfather was?" I considered carefully before answering. The house doesn't simply choose based on bloodline. It responds to respect, care, and genuine connection. You've shown all three, but ultimately, life may take you in directions far from here. But if I wanted to stay, to learn everything about it like you did? I smiled, recognizing the spark that had likely reflected in my own eyes at his age. Then you'll continue building your relationship with this place. And decades from now, we'll see where that relationship stands. The most profound lesson emerged gradually through these months of adjustment, understanding the difference between ownership and belonging. Legal documents declared me the property's owner, but the deeper truth was that I belonged to this place as much as it belonged to me. Our connection transcended conventional possession, existing in a realm of mutual care and recognition. Similarly, family relationships couldn't be claimed through obligation or manipulation, only earned through genuine respect and understanding. Melissa and Beatrice were gradually learning this lesson, rebuilding connections based on authenticity rather than expectation. On the anniversary of the confrontation, we gathered for a family dinner in the house that had catalyzed our transformation. The meal unfolded without the tension that had characterized previous gatherings, conversations flowing naturally between generations. Even Beatrice participated comfortably, having finally accepted the new family dynamics. After dinner, standing on the porch, watching moonlight shimmer across the lake, Jennifer slipped her hand into mine. "The house feels different tonight, peaceful, like it's satisfied." I nodded, understanding precisely what she meant. The vigilant awareness that had characterized the property since the ownership challenge had softened into contentment, the structure settling comfortably around its recognized family. Later that night, after everyone departed, I sat alone in Grandfather's study, now my own workspace. "We did all right, didn't we?" I asked the empty room. "Sorted things out the way you hoped we would." The desk lamp brightened slightly in what I'd come to recognize as acknowledgement. Outside, wind chimes tinkled, though no breeze stirred the summer air. The journey from betrayal to resolution had transformed not just my relationship with the house, but my understanding of home itself. Home wasn't merely structure and location, but recognition and belonging, a place that knew you as intimately as you knew it. As I prepared for bed, running my hand along the familiar hallway wall, I felt the subtle vibration that had become the house's equivalent of communication. Not words exactly, but intention, protection, acceptance, continuation. "I know," I answered quietly. "I'm not going anywhere." Have you ever experienced a place that felt like it knew you? A family home, a childhood hideaway, or even a newly discovered location that somehow resonated with something deep inside you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this tale of family betrayal and unexpected justice resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about standing your ground when it matters most. And don't forget to share with someone who might need a reminder that sometimes justice finds its own way. Thanks for listening, and remember, home isn't just where you live, it's where you belong.